The Missing Witches podcast is brought to you by the Missing Witches Coven. Our coven mate, poet Sun, said, I came to this coven because nobody else was centering mutual aid and informed resistance like the Missing Witches, but this community is also hugely loving and supportive and full of artists and thinkers and healers who have such a huge diversity of experience. Even when we're not in circle, there's magic afoot. Also, I have a chronic illness, which makes it really hard not to swear all the time, so I am in fabulous company here. Bless a fucking being. And coven mate Jen from Wheel of My Year wrote, I discovered Missing Witches through Queen of All Queens, Jinx Monsoon's podcast. After reading their contributor covenant, I thought I would give it a chance and attended a new moon circle. As a queer person of color living in a flyover state, I had very low standards. I was used to being burned by performative allyship and virtue signalers. These witches were different. My first circle was a transformative experience as a solitary witch. Missing Witches Coven is what was missing from my practice. I'm so grateful to be found. Anyway, those are some of the people who bring you this podcast. And if that sounds like your people, then come find out more at missingwitches.com. We've been missing you.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. 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 You must be a witch.
Hi.
Oh, shit. Hi.
There we go.
I'm so excited.
Me too. Me
I
too.
mean, you must be a little bit burnt. You've done a million of these in the last couple
I've done a lot in the last couple of weeks. I have, but I haven't been on a witch podcast. So it's extra special. Actually, for me, I burned some cedar. I lit a candle that's back there. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, it's a pretty cool one. And I pulled 2 cards from my healing herbal deck. So I'm ready.
Oh, I feel so good. Welcome, listeners. Welcome, all my nerves, all my teenage improv club excitement, all the versions of ourselves that had wild dreams that pushed in through the masks that we wore. Welcome all of those beings with us today in this weird coven we make between our ears. Our guest today is Carolyn Taylor. I mean, if you're a Canadian, for sure you know Carolyn Taylor. This is like iconic feminist comedy, like Baroness von Sketch changed everything. If you were like me and you grew up obsessively watching Kids in the Hall, when you saw this, there was this wave of emotional relief, like, oh, fuck, finally, my friends are here. And Carolyn Taylor brought that into existence, conjured those women, brought them into the room, and then together they created those fast-paced, hilarious, weird stories that made fun of us and showed us truth, and it was the best. And then, just recently, this weird series she conjured into existence also, I Have Nothing. I struggled to describe it. I felt so weird watching it. Has it been weird to talk about? Because it exists in this weird place between comedy and like such earnestness.
Yeah, that was the scariest part about it when I was finishing up the edit with the editors and the team and Zach. It was like, oh gosh, this is a lot more earnest than I realized it was going to be. And is that okay? And I mean, I realized that as I was going through the journey as well, like, oh, wow, I'm in this. I have to do right by this vision and by these skaters in this world and the conjure, the dream of it all. And so as a comedian, that's scary to put yourself in that position where you're not like just commenting off on the side or, playing a huge character or something. So yeah, that was scary for sure.
And how did you ride that out? There must have been moments where you were really, I don't know, emotionally exhausted even, it seems like.
Always. I was so emotionally exhausted. Like the first day of shooting, we did some interviews. We did that interview with my sister. We had a couple of just sort of basic interviews the first day, and then we went to the psychic that first day. So that was on our first day shooting. And I went in, with an open mind and heart, and decided, like, I'm not going to make fun of psychics or to make fun of that experience. I'm going to have the experience. And I've had my cards read. I've read people's cards, I have great respect for it. But I did not expect that I was going to be brought to tears on my first day. I don't even know the crew well. And now I'm welling up. I'm like, oh God, this isn't what this, this isn't how I thought it was going to go. And that sort of set the tone. It was like, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll see,
You had to convince people
Yes.
to go on this journey with you.
Yes.
You had to convince people to put money in, and like there's a crew, like people are
Yes.
hired.
Yes.
Did they think it was a joke? Like, was the vision, you talk about getting this awesome sizzle made, was the vision at that point like comedian does a funny thing?
I think everyone came to it with a different sense of what it might be, because we weren't following a template or a formula, including me. So I didn't know exactly how deep I was going to go. But I think once, Sandra and I had spoken, and I really committed to going for like Gordieva and Peltier, it was like, oh, there's no fucking around now. Like, yeah, we can have fun. Yeah, there'll be funny moments and there'll be all the stuff around it, but I can't fuck this up. She's the goddess and the greatest of all time, and don't mess this up. And okay. And that became really wild to dive in. Like, that felt like going through a portal.
You've talked about how you felt like you were channeling something.
Yeah.
You were possessed. You used the term "I was possessed."
Yes.
When you were on
shoot.
Yeah. You were possessed.
I think so. I mean, it's like the vision came, then the comedy routine, which in itself was a big leap. I was really scared to perform it on stage. Like, what am I showing people? Like, what am I doing? I've never done like a big physical piece like that.
Yeah.
That braids imagination, physicality, reality, fantasy together, and comedy. So when that landed, that was extraordinary, as a feeling like, oh, people are hearing what I'm saying. I'm able to convey this, or we're able to enter this space together and communicate together. And I'm able to do these jumps on stage. They're able to see, like, people were like, no, I saw you landing the jumps. It felt like that. So, oh God, what was the question? I'm not sure.
Okay, well, the question was pretty floppy, but the idea about
possession.
what was possessing you? What were you possessed by? How did that feeling of being like carried? How do you relate to that in your life in general? I have 7 questions about the word possessed.
I'm so excited when that happens, when a vision takes hold and you can feel momentum.
Yeah.
And certainly with Baroness, there was momentum. And you spoke to The Conjuring. I mean, each of those artists conjured themselves for sure. I, of course, brought them together as a group, the 4 of them, but they have, we were all creating it together.
Those are powers for sure.
Those are powers. So anyway, just to, with this possession, and when there is momentum and you feel that, your job is to get out of the way a little bit, like to plan and also allow the forces to work. And I mean, I'm talking like this with you, I wouldn't necessarily with everybody, but yeah, when you feel those forces, you try to go with them, and then ideas present themselves, and then you think you've hit a roadblock, and next thing you know, someone else appears and there's a different door that opens. You're like, okay, I guess we're going this way. And so it's almost like the shape of a river, where, it was not a straight line. It was not a straight line.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of talked in another interview about your experience doing the Camino in a similar fashion, that it was like, you kind of had to lean into trusting that when you needed something, it would show up.
Yes. So the Camino really taught me that. Like, I recommend that to anyone. I mean, I walked the Camino, I think it was 2005. So I think it's changed a lot, and maybe become more popular and more populated. But yeah, if you surrender to that process and you say, okay, my only job is to walk west for 30 days, there's some clarity that comes, and then your own issues come up. So if you have an issue with authority, or you have an issue with, whatever, a type of personality type, you're a boss, suddenly you're not with that person anymore. And yet that dynamic is showing itself again. So that was a great learning experience, to be like, oh no, it's you. Wherever you go, there you are. And what you need appears when you need it. And when you actually lean into that and go, okay, I'm going to trust that and play with that, it becomes, a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, magic even.
Magic for sure. For sure. Yeah, it's a great, oh, that walk is fantastic.
Like, I struggle with the word spirituality. I part of what we, this podcast is sort of investigating what the word witch even means and claiming it, as a space of activism and creativity and art and politics. Before we started the podcast, you said you pulled 2 cards, you lit a candle. When I wrote to you, which I couldn't believe you wrote back, you used hashtag witch sees witch. How does that word sit for you? Or like, do you feel comfortable
Yeah.
thinking about witchiness?
Yeah. So yes, I feel comfortable thinking about witchiness. Yes, listen, I think because of our deep histories, all of us that go back, generations and generations, I don't take the word lightly, and I also know there's a lot of pain and horrible abuses. So to identify as a witch, I think is to carry some of that fear forward, if we're speaking that way. And it's even scary to talk about it like this. I definitely feel in tune with it. I always have. And so, yeah, while I don't put it in my bio, I definitely feel like a witch. And a lot of my friends, sometimes we find we're in a natural coven. We're all sitting around a fire, not people who I specifically identify as witches. And then we're like, oh God, there's 13 of us. Here we are, we're in a coven. So let's call it light, not necessarily well researched, but certainly attuned to nature and herbs and forces and women.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I appreciated that you were cool with that, or that you saw that part.
For sure.
Are you in your cabin?
I'm
Speaking
in
of
a
nature?
studio, yeah, in the backyard, and it's a studio that was just an old garage, and my friend Phil helped me, and I learned how to use power tools and stuff, and we
Nice.
put in all the stuff that's what on Kijiji, and so now it's my studio space in the
Nice.
backyard. Yeah,
Yeah, it looks beautiful and so comfortable.
it is. I really love it. It feels like one of the things a friend and I were talking about is I was talking about this room and to finally have this idea of a room of one's own.
Yeah.
And, I was like, oh, this room is giving me room. This space is giving me space. Just this
Yeah.
idea of having a space that's yours, that you've created through work.
What's like bubbling in the space these days? Or like, is your imagination starting to go to next projects?
Um,
What comes up after I Have Nothing? Are you a choreographer now? What are you doing?
I mean, that makes me laugh when I think there are choreographers and Sandra has said, oh, we should do something together, or you should do another show, a live show or something. And just try to embrace that in a really playful, fun way and say, well, sure, if people want to work with me again, yeah, let's try it. So both the choreographer and the comedian and me find it funny and something that, yeah, I really love that process. And I do think in choreography a little now. For skating, it took a long time for it to land for me.
Yeah.
I was well into the project before I even understood that, oh, my job is to take emotion and translate that into movement.
Mm.
And so, yes, I would, other ideas are definitely percolating. There's some for sure bubbling. And then it's knowing when's the right time, when the heat starts to, when you start to feel it on a different project or a
Mm.
season 2 or something. So yes, things are bubbling, but I haven't gone into full manifestation.
The dream show that I want to attend is a live show with different skating routines choreographed by different non-choreographers,
Yes.
executive produced by you.
Oh,
That's my seed.
I like that a lot.
'Cause
I like that.
skating so underutilized as an art form, right?
Yes, and it was really interesting to hear the skaters and how excited they were, or that they were, to have someone from outside the community, work with them, and how an outsider sees things versus the
Yeah.
people who've really been in it, a lot of them, their entire lives. So yeah, to see other people come together. I love when, disciplines cross. I
Me
love it. I
too,
remember
yeah.
did you ever watch The Love Boat as a kid, or
Oh, like a
any of those
little, like
Okay.
grandma watched it, but I wouldn't remember names and stuff.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
one of my favorite things that used to happen in network television back then was like when things would cross, like the Charlie's Angels or on the Love
Oh,
Boat,
yes.
or, it's like, what? So I love when people from different disciplines cross into each other's world. You're like, you're not supposed to be on Fantasy Island. Like,
Yes,
what's happening? So
exactly.
anyway, yes. So I would love to do more. And I love your idea. That's great.
Yeah. I want to talk more about like how improvisation worked and
Mm,
in those moments of creation because you're in this like super tight time frame, it seems
yes.
like.
Yes.
And yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
you only have these icons for a couple of days under
Yeah.
really rigid conditions.
Yes.
And part of the joke when you're watching is like, Carolyn doesn't know the terms. She can't skate. She has a helmet on. It's all very silly. Like you've
Yes.
talked about how the agreement was like you would always be the buffoon. They would
Yes.
never be the joke. And like that
Yes.
works so beautifully.
Yeah.
But there is also a thing where it feels like to me anyway in watching
Mm.
where they start to like shake out a little bit and be willing to improvise with you
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
play with you. Can you talk
Yes.
about what that seemed like it was like for all of you, for them?
Oh, it was so exciting. I mean, it, I think originally I thought I was going to be with skaters for about 2 weeks. I think Sandra had said, you want 12 days or like, 8 to 12. So then when it was like 4 days, I'm like, oh God. And personalities, when David Peltier came in, he's like, okay, so let's just show me what to do and I'm going to train it and then we'll do it and we'll keep practicing it and then it's done. And
Yeah.
it was like, ooh, that's not it. Oh, what I want to do. And so bringing them into the spirit of improv, which really you can only improvise, or I'll speak for myself, I can only improvise when I feel safe.
Yeah.
So I started at Second City and learned improv there. And I was a fairly terrible improviser at first. And if I didn't feel safe with my cast or I was new or it was too boys club or whatever,
Yeah.
I wasn't in the moment and I couldn't play. And now it's one of my favorite things to do. And, in Baroness, we improvised a lot. And on stage, if I'm with people I trust and like, I love to improvise. So it was an exciting part of the process. And Zach Russell, who also directed the show and was an executive producer, we would, be back and forth talking all the time. And I'd be like, well, I want to see what happens. He's like, no, what happens in the story? What happened? And I'm like, well, I don't know because it hasn't happened yet. And that was a really cool dialectic because in television and creation, you do actually need to plan certain things. But in improv, you have to leave room for magic and for things to happen to play the truth. Right. So that was I think that worked in our favor that we had those two forces, in the creation process.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And then for the skaters, did you feel like that was a genuine, like a similar experience? Like they had to feel safe with you and then they were willing
I
to improvise moves,
I
contribute.
believe so. Yeah. In watching the series again and in the edit and in the edit suite and watching, it's like, oh, right. Katya was sort of more open to all of that at the beginning. Certainly she was eager to try those things. But at the same time, when we're talking about like lifts and, really intricate moves, it's as we learned in the show and I learned, it's dangerous. You actually can't just like have fun and toss someone in the air.
Oh,
So I think we built that trust and that had to happen at like breakneck speed. But
yeah.
we were together and creating a really safe environment. And I think just the way you say to me, we're doing this podcast and we can edit it. And if you need to take a moment, you have that ability is creating that same kind of container to say,
Right.
hey, my objective here is not to make you look bad or funny or make fun of you and it is a comedy, but chances are if anyone's laughing at, it will be at me. So just don't worry. And I think that helped all of us. That was one of the guiding principles that I think help make people feel safe so that we can explore. And then, of course, they did get more comfortable. By the end, David's playing and coming up with his own ideas. And it's like, what? I wish, if we could have even started there and had a few more days. But it happened when it needed to. So
Yeah.
that sort of last day in Toronto was really exciting. That was when tons of great work got done. And then in Edmonton, that final push. By then, it was like, it's a bit like when you're on a deadline or for me anyway, I can procrastinate, and then have laser focus at the end. And so it was in those final days and hours that a lot of the really precise work got done.
It's so emotional to watch because you do go through the really it's a real emotional journey, this series. Like the 6 episodes, I'm sure the whole thing for you was wild.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, there's this strange through line with, the song I Have Nothing. The song is written by the same person who wrote the Calgary Olympic anthem.
88 Olympics. Yeah, David Foster wrote both. When I found that out, I mean, I'd always known that he had written the 88 Olympics. I always knew that. I loved the theme. I've always loved the theme. If you're obsessed with those
Yeah.
Olympics, you love the theme. I know it was David Foster, Canadian David Foster. And then when I learned, I was preparing for the show and like just doing research, and I was watching, I think, Alina Waithe Instagram Live or something. She was talking with Ricky Minor, Whitney Houston's former musical director, and Lena was wearing a Bodyguard T-shirt, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on? Like, this is cool." Like, I'm into synchronicity. I'm like, "This
Yeah.
is strange." And then talked about, and then David Foster wrote, "I Have Nothing." I'm like, "What?" Like, my brain cracked in half. And then that the song was actually released on my birthday.
No.
I'm like, "Yeah, that's super
I
weird."
didn't catch that. That's
Yeah, I
wild.
don't know if I've mentioned that, but yeah. So that's super weird too. So just as those things unfolded, I'm like, "Oh, get out." And then when people would say, "Well, can you just use a different song?" It's like, that really was anathema, because I'm like, well, no, I actually can't, because that's not the point.
Yeah.
That's not the vision. It's not just, comedian tries to choreograph. It's like, no, there was a vision, and it needs to be as fulfilled, to the best of my ability, given, what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other piece of this sort of like, I don't know what a good phrase for it is. I don't want to say the haunting of it, but there's like echoes, right? Your own family has all these echoes building up
Yes.
to this moment
Yeah.
where you, like, for you to even have those references as all the sports knowledge, and then the beautiful tribute to your dad that ends
Uh,
up in this story, like,
we hadn't expected that. I mean, that wasn't a planned story beat. That was like, my sister, on actually the first day, Zach and I were taking turns interviewing her. And she started talking about my dad and his obsession with the Olympics. And I was like, what? I didn't know this. I think of him as baseball dad. And so that was wild. And then she, or I guess Zach probably said, "Hey, can you send the whole movie?" She's like, "Oh, I've got some footage." And then next thing you know, one of the editors is staying up all night crying. Andy King, he said he formed this beautiful tribute and found other voice recordings of my dad. He really was present in this process in a way I hadn't at all expected at all, but it kept coming up. And then an odd piece I'd share with you, if and anyone else who's listening, I suppose. All right, just you. I'm just talking
just
to
me,
you,
it's
right?
just me.
Ugh. I mean, maybe this is nothing to other people, but my dad's name was Russell Taylor, and Zach and I together on the slate, he's Zach Russell, Carolyn Taylor, we were Russell Taylor. We were just going to go by our last names. I'm like, oh my God, there's my dad's name. Like, just some really small and yet, for me, very powerful signs or synchronicities.
So in a like what if imagining, like,
Yes.
so if this whole work is sort of being called forward by an accumulation of energies,
Sure. Yeah.
what's it about? Or like, what does your dad think of it?
Oof. I don't know. I really don't know. I would love to know, but I don't know. I think maybe I just look at it almost as a protection, if that makes sense. Yeah, kind of spiritual protection, but I don't know beyond that.
What does that mean? What's it protecting, or how?
I'm not sure. It's just a feeling of an energetic protection, like I'm looking out for you and it'll be okay. That sort of, that energy.
Yeah. But there's something, because I'm so glad you feel protected, and I'm so glad how to make a safe container for people, artists, to make new things. These are a lot of like magic terms and also like improv stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Basic,
so interesting. But I also think, like, because I was a viewer of it and it made me uncomfortable and emotional, and it made me think a lot about like how strange it is that new things ever happen, right? Like that
How do you mean?
weird.
Yeah.
Well, like how does something weird and new come into the world ever,
Mm.
right?
I think when we let it, like, well, one, when we're open to it. And I mean, that I would say, my mom certainly was a force that while she didn't live out all her dreams, she really was very open minded to magic and ideas. And so that was never really quashed in us as kids. We were able to have imaginations and we weren't told that was wrong or stupid or whatever. I owe a great service to her for that, for many things. I think original things happen when we stop saying how things have to be done. And that was what was really exhilarating about this show. There was no template. So there was no one coming and saying, well, this is how you have to do it. You don't do a docu-comedy about choreographic figure skaters unless you do it this way. And it's like there was no template. So Zach and I really spent lots of time in so many different possibilities. There were so many ways it could go. And I think that's part of conjuring, right? Like you have all of it. And then it starts to say, oh, I'll take this and that. And then a lot of things just fell off
Right.
to the side because they didn't serve the story or, but yeah, I think it's staying open and realizing when someone says, no, they don't want to do that. Okay, well, let's do something else. And then you find out, oh, actually, now they are open to jumping or you're like, okay, well, great.
Right.
Let's explore that.
Yeah, well, and that's something I think is so interesting in this series too, is or about you in this series is like you are so visionary, like so like comedically visionary, committed to
Yeah.
this idea of this thing that you have like leapt across stages, convincing people to see it.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And it's so great.
Well,
And the super fun thing is like, as an audience member, watching you do the stand up.
Mm.
It is like a very funny, surreal brain body experience because it's like you actually, I mean, Mae Martin says it in the show, the audience goes crazy because it's like they saw you just land the jump. Like there's something that happens in the brain that crosses over, and that's so fucking cool already, right?
Yeah.
I think I lost my train of thought just being excited about that, but
yeah, there's something strange that
there's
happens.
something so strange that happens.
I don't know what it is, and something that we contemplated a lot was this idea of memory and what is memory. And so even when I'm, in front of the audience on stage, when I would do a lift and I would skate with the skater over my head, I'm like skating like powerfully.
Yes.
And Sandra's like, well, no, you glide. Like generally you glide when you're holding up a skater. There isn't someone skating basically like a hockey player, with someone above their head. And it's like, oh, okay, oh, right. But
Right.
yet an audience, when they're watching it, they're not thinking that. They're like, oh, yeah, of course. That's how it's done. And so it's interesting what our memories of what figure skating is versus what it actually is. It's wild when you're actually confronted with the stark reality.
The reality of it. I remembered where I was going with that. Thank you.
Okay, right.
For catching that ball. The other weird thing that happens or that you're so good at is like you're committed to the vision, but then also constantly throughout you improvise. So you're willing to be like, okay, it's not Kurt Browning and Katarina Witt. It's not two singles where it's going to be this whole other thing. We're going to do an edit to show a jump somewhere. Like, can you talk about tools and practices of improv that we can use in our own, like,
yes.
There, because I also heard you talk on an interview about the term greasing the chain.
Oh,
so that's like another one I want to talk about.
Okay, cool. So we'll save greasing the chain. I'll put that over here. See if I can remember it. And the first question was about, right, so you have a vision. At first, it's like, oh, it's Kurt Browning and Katarina Witt. And then realizing, oh, that's not possible. They're two single skaters. I don't know if Katarina Witt even performs on skates anymore. Kurt certainly was still, but there are certain moves that pairs do that singles don't do. Oh, okay, right. You have to change. So I think part of improv, and I mean, I learned this at Second City, when you go out to do a scene, you have an objective and or even who you are, you have a first line of dialogue. You don't really know much beyond that. And then you have to be ready to just keep throwing things away, like you can hold your character, but you think you're a pianist playing the piano and someone's like, oh, you're baking dough. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm making dough. You have to be ready to throw away what you went in with but you can still have the attitude or the character that you came in with. It's a practice in what do you keep and what do you throw away? What's essential and what is not? And essential is I need to have a piece choreographed to this song with great skaters. Okay, you can't use two singles. All right, well, who can I have? So you have to be prepared. And I think that's part of the creative and improvisational process to really know what's essential. And if you hold on to that and you're honest about that with yourself, then the things are all there. The material's there. I think most often, if it's really something that you want to do and something that you want to create with other people, and a willingness, of course, of everyone.
Yeah. So there's a safe container.
Yeah.
There's a willingness of everyone.
Yes.
There's like being honest about what's essential.
Mhm.
Or maybe those were two kind of separate things.
Yeah, maybe, but something like that. Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
also look for what's there. You keep, I'd sometimes be like, oh, it has to be this. Well, wait, what is here? Okay, let's do that instead. Like, okay, great. And so just really being grateful for what's presenting itself. And then sometimes it will morph into what you want. Like you don't think it is, and then it will. And
Yeah.
so that trusting, there's definitely trust and people being willing, they don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything. Know enough. Like Sandra would say when she choreographed, sometimes just knowing somewhere to start, have something, and then the next moments present themselves. Because in fairness, she really does approach choreography from a place of improvisation as well. But for the sake of the series, she stayed more in, and to be fair, she needed to with me because I don't have the skill to do that. She's an Olympian. She can improvise. She understands the craft. Whereas someone who doesn't, it's really important that they actually don't just leave it all to chance. So I think it's understanding those two things as well.
Are there other ways? I want to come back to greasing the chain, but
Yeah, right.
Are there other ways that, like, I feel like I did improv in high school, Villa Maria in NDG in Montreal.
I went to Villa Maria before
No.
Yes. Yes. I switched school. My best friend changed schools and I changed with her. But
I didn't know that when I said that. I just knew that you grew up in NDG.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I was there for a couple of years.
That's really cool. I feel like learning about improv from a young age, my dad was like a theater guy. Like it made it possible for me to, or it's been like a set of tools that I feel like make it possible for me to like start with the dumb thing, start with something messy or be willing to jump into something and be really, really uncomfortable or really ugly and then try to figure it out from there.
That's greasing the chain, I think.
That's what that is?
That's our link. Yes. So then greasing the chain, I guess is a term, is it musicians use? I don't know. I learned it from a couple of friends who are musicians. So maybe it is a term. I don't know. I don't know its etymology, but
let's say it's a term now.
Yeah, let's call it a term. Someone came up with it, not me, but this group of witches, essentially, we play together, a band called Mints. And when we play, we always start by greasing the chain, which is like we each choose an instrument and we have something and sometimes we close our eyes or not, and you just start playing something, or you might have a riff in your head or something. And at first it sounds horrible because we don't say, oh, we're playing in the key of D or this is the progression. We don't do any of that. And so you really have to listen. And if someone has sort of hooked into something cool, then we all start adapting to that person, right? Like you can't just do what you're doing without listening, or you just have cacophony. But at first, you can have greasing the chain, which means it's messy, it's ugly, it doesn't sound good. And you just keep staying in that space with the intention of finding connection and having something that sounds good. That's your intention. And you just slog through it. And then eventually, oh, you're all in the same key and things are sounding great and lyrics are starting to appear. And that's how we work all the time. It's starting from something messy and gross and a thing that you wouldn't want someone walking in on because they'd be like, you guys are horrible. But if you can sit in that discomfort and know that you're going to find each other, then it's so worth it.
Do you have aspirations or dreams or visions of doing more music?
Yeah, I love making music. And I'm not particularly I'm not a natural, like, I'm not a natural singer, as you can see from the show. I can play different instruments and I love playing them, but I'm not like ever going to be anywhere close to the best person in the room or even remotely, like not
Yeah.
even miles away from anyone who's very good. But what I am good at is I'm good at listening. And I might just stay like on a keyboard and stay on 2 notes and find the truth in those 2 notes and collaborate. And then often I'm on lyrics, on vocals, because we don't care. It's not about sounding perfect. It's about just keying into the truth or
Yeah.
oh gosh, that sounds so woo. Well, listen, this is your audience. These are the people who
You're
understand.
okay. Yeah.
It's safe space, safe
It's
space.
a safe space
Yeah.
for finding what's true
For-
in 2 notes for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did do a music project a few years back with my friends at the Bat House in Kingston, and we all got together over 18 days. And there is an album that's been mastered and mixed. I just haven't had the courage or the sense of timing that it's right to put it out. So it exists, but it'll be more like an artifact, not like it has no dreams of becoming a hit pop sensation. It's literally for the people who would find it interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's something to that. Like, I feel like there's something to that as a gift to people who didn't get to learn that didn't get to learn how to be uncomfortable on the way to finding the thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
No, I do. And you have to. Like, there's no one who starts out good at something. Like, I don't think that's possible unless you're like a prodigy. But short of that, no, you kind of have to be bad before you're good. And also in that sort of spirit of that sort of wabi-sabi, the beauty is in the mistakes, right? Like, and so even, with my song with May, our song, it's not perfect and our notes are not perfect and the lyrics are weird. And my voice May has a gorgeous, amazing, fantastic voice. And I'm not like that, but we wanted both voices to exist because it's in the imperfection that the soul sort of exists of the song, rather than like bringing in top singers to sing it. Like it just wouldn't, I don't know. So I think embracing the beauty and imperfection and being again around safe people who value those things as well, then you're able to create and that's your audience. Like those are the people you're playing with and for.
Did it feel like it added safety having May there? I know you guys are friends for 25 years or whatever.
Well, someone said 25, it's wrong. But 20.
Oh.
Anyway, 20. Damn. Misquoted again. Oh gosh, it felt great because May is such a fantastic comedian and actor and friend and musician and improviser and observer of life and open and interested in metaphysics and in the classics and the Greeks and the hero's journeys and all of that. So May, of course, was like the perfect person to. Someone said like that they were the Greek chorus of the piece, and I thought that was a really cool observation.
Yeah. And as an audience, you definitely feel like held by them. But then there's also that moment when they are like, "Oh, I just realized this is not a joke,
right,
for you."
Yes.
So there's a way that like having your closest person there can also be extra confronting. Like, it's harder to not be who you've always been somehow.
Yes. And then from a comedy perspective, someone saying this is no longer a joke is funny, right? So it's true and then it's not funny anymore, which then makes it funny. So like it becomes a bit of a safeguard, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that it was spectacular to have them there, but also I imagine it added a bit to the out-of-body experience to have people who knew you in one way see you suddenly trying to do this thing very sincerely.
Well, and having May come back. So May really was there at the very beginning of shooting and then, went off back to LA and then came back for the finale. And when they showed up, they really were like, what has happened? And so that was very real. It was like, what the fuck? I was with my friend and we used to be joking and having fun and playing hacky sack. And now, these Olympians are listening to her. What is happening?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Can I ask, you mentioned before we started that you pulled 2 cards. Do you want to tell us
Mhm.
what they were?
Yes, for sure. So they often I'll let 2 cards, like if they fall out while
Mm.
shuffling. And so that's what happened with these 2. So, and it's a herbal deck. It's called the Herbal Healing Deck. And this deck appeared. Listen, I have to tell you, this is kind of cool. I was walking in Victoria. I was working on a show where I was playing a witch. Okay, this is
No.
wild. It was a kids series, and I'm playing a mean witch, who terrorizes the children of the town. Fine. I had a bunch of days off, and I'm walking in Victoria, BC, and I'm talking to my friend Lisa Brooke, who is also very, very witchy and involved in all of this world. And so she was talking to me. I'm on my headset, and we're just walking, and I stop at a window, and I'm just looking in a shop that looks interesting. And she's talking. She says, you really need to have a deck out there. You should have a tarot deck. You should have some sort of deck. And I'm like, well, Lisa, I'm actually looking, like, as you say this, I'm looking at a deck in the window right now. She's like, I'm buying it for you because you want someone to buy your deck. So I went in, and it's this herbal healing deck that has, I'm really interested in herbalism. And so it has great information about
Mm.
herbs and roots and flowers and trees, medicinally, historically, spiritually, and as divination tools. And the 2 that I pulled, or that fell out today, were calendula, which is shine. And essentially it's, again, very sort of childlike calendula, and also just being open, like that it's, to me, it says this is safe, just be yourself and be open, and it's okay. Like in some environments, it's not safe to do that. You've got to
Yeah.
be cynical and, you know,
Yeah.
funny. And then the other is turmeric, persistence.
Ah.
And this one's cool. Like, while persistence doesn't look so glamorous, you just keep working. The description, there's usually a quote at the beginning. Oh, it's an Einstein quote. Okay. It says, never give up on what you really want to do. The person with the big dreams is more powerful than one with all the facts. Einstein. Interesting. So that sort of speaks to, again,
yeah.
there you go. Like, okay, so we're talking about this. And that it's true, because people with the facts, if we just went by facts, we'd say getting rights to a song that big is not impossible, but really fucking hard. And to start a project without having that secured is not smart, is not reasonable, and it can be turned they could just say, I don't want to. And I like your face. Like, there could be no reason, there could be any reason to say no. And you don't know how to skate. Who's ever going to agree to this? This hasn't been done before. How are you going to translate? Like, there's so many facts that say this shouldn't work, right? What's extraordinary about this is there's so many people who are willing to see the possibility. And that was Catalyst, the people who I worked with, Zach, of course, Zach Russell, Blue Ant, who came on board, and then Bell Crave, to say, oh, I see this. Like, they didn't see exactly how it was going to go. We couldn't give them that, but they saw that the passion was real, the dream was real. And that, again, I have tangible skills. I know how to make television. Like, Zach is a genius. People who know how to execute something, have experience in the field that they're in, whether that's a line producer or a PA or whatever. People knew what they were doing in the positions they were in, and they were open to it not being, it's harder for personality types that like to know. So I know that was very challenging for some individuals, for sure.
Yeah, right? Like, I feel like I spend a lot of my life with people who are mostly like me, because I'm sort of, you're like a magnet for people who are kind of like you. And like, so I make a lot of messes, and I try strange things, and like, I'm often with people who are okay with that. But some of my like partner, my best friends, are definitely more in the like very uncomfortable to be so messy.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something there in how we learn to dance with each other. That is,
it's
so
that dialectic. Yeah. And in the right measure, it really, and respect for both methodologies or approaches is sort of what's needed. And also, which is the one that's guiding? Like, which is the one that's guiding it? So in this case, the magic improvisational aspect ish is guiding, but just because there still needs to be the planning and the hard budget things and the Excel spreadsheets and the endless Zoom meetings and
yeah, you gotta have all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it does feel like that mix of the perseverance and the optimism, maybe the turmeric and the calendula.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you feel like you have wanted to talk about more about the show or this experience? I know you've done a ton of interviews, but are there parts that you feel like,
Well, I think, I mean, I have spoken with a lot of people, and pieces have been written, and sometimes people, you don't get to hear all the people who worked on it. And so often a light is like shone on me. Oh, you're the one who created it. But there's so many people who took a leap of faith into the project, and the crew and the camera, DOP and camera people who were like on the ice and there for hours, like our DOP Chet Tilakani and Dan Tunisian. Dan, when we were on the ice, spent his whole time just with the camera on me. So while Chet was getting the skaters, he was getting me. So he never even saw, he's like, I don't even know what the routine looks like the entire time I'm getting your reaction, or you and Sandra. So just the different roles, all the people who had to, try to clear rights to the song or rights to Olympic footage, that it really, while there was magic and conjuring, there was a lot of hard work. Right. And so I would just say that isn't always the part of interviews that makes the copy. That it's not all just magic, and it doesn't just appear like hard work. It has to be a part of it.
yeah, we say here, there is no mundane.
Right.
All the work is part of the spell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for helping us see outside the portal or the box of the TV to see all the people that were around there.
Yeah.
Getting cold on the ice.
Getting cold. Yeah. And taking chances.
Yeah. And like, it's fun to imagine for me also the ripple effect of everyone tipping over into believing in the vision, right?
Yeah. That was exciting. And it just, I don't even know what the moment was when that happened, but it just sort of did. And yeah, that was great.
Yeah. I can imagine, like, I didn't grow up in a sports family, but there were moments when watching the Olympics where a great sportscaster makes you feel the hope and the sweat and the labor of the person whose brief moment you're watching now. That person translates for you that kid's dream or whatever, and suddenly you care about it even if you don't care about sports.
Yes. Yeah.
So I sort of feel that I feel lucky to have gotten to encounter that bit of your dad in this story.
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful perception. It's true. And he loved sports so much. So when I listened to the broadcast that he did for the Expos, he was I think they called it like the color commentary or whatever that was. So the person who really brings in the emotion and all the sort of extra bits, and just to hear him laugh. And he had a great sense of humor and a love of sport, like a love of the game. And then as someone who's not particularly athletic, me, and not super sports focused, to give over to that and be like, okay, like, it's exciting. It's exciting to tap into those passions and worlds that aren't naturally yours.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you got to meet Kurt Browning. I mean, that's like,
he's
13-year-old me would die.
I know, he's so fun. And then at the opening, we did a launch Just for Laughs. He gave me his jersey, like this T-shirt from 1994 from Lillehammer, that he said he'd lost a bet with Katarina Witt and he had to give her a foot massage or something like that. And and it's so soft. And that night I came home from the launch. I was staying at a hotel. And I put on my jersey, like I felt 14, and I was like, I just sat, I'm like, I'm sleeping in this tonight, like just like
yes, yes, I would die. My grandmother and I would die. Yeah, because it was so important. Some of this feels so niche Canadian.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Are most of the people in your community, are they Canadian, or are they all over? Or are they different?
They're all over. They're all over the world. Yeah.
What are you all working on conjuring, or is there any group effort on something, or is it
group effort? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, our group effort really is in trying to, I think, sort of liberate our own individual and collective power to make our worlds better, our lives better. Yeah. That's the work.
That's
right?
okay. That was, yes. That sounds great.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Fuck. I mean, I also just like to be honest about how heartbroken and full of rage we are. And also to be honest when there's magic in the world to insist upon its existence,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. That idea of magic is afoot. And the more you acknowledge magic and revere it and know that it's elusive but that it can appear, and just when you think it can't, it can, and leaving room for it. It's just exciting to be around people who are open, talking to people who are open to that and who love it and recognize it.
Yeah.
And it's there for everyone. Like, it's not
Everyone.
just for some, it's there for everyone.
Yeah, that's like our main thing, I think, in our coven is like, anybody can join, and we find each other and we sort of talk about unmasking from all the roles we have to play during the day. And then just to be with people who come from all different cultures and backgrounds and different interests in magic or beliefs about magic or, different religious traumas. And just to get to be honest together is, has become important for us anyway.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I think the way I really wanted to talk to you about improv because of that. So thank you for indulging in that in the past hour with me. I just appreciate your work so much. I'm just a huge fan. You're super fucking cool. I'm slightly less sweaty than I was at the beginning because you're so lovely. But are there any practices? Could be professional or improv related, could be magical or creative, that you feel like you could share with our listeners, that they could take a piece of your practice with you today?
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I'm looking at a word on my board here. It says song. I would say one thing that helped me early on, and nice to be reminded of it, is if you're looking to become in tune with yourself or energetic flow, to listen to a song that you can vibe with, and it has either a beat or a message or a something, melody, or just a vibration that really resonates, and to let yourself move that, to just get in touch with your own rhythm, and then let that carry you into the project. Just the power of music and song and rhythm, and that when I auditioned for Second City, the first time I listened to Lauryn Hill track, and like, I loved it. And I just got in the zone, and then I wasn't thinking about fear. I was just like riding it all the way to the audition, and just the power of that if you can't find it in yourself or you're just not feeling it, that music often can be a portal into the vibe, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Such a simple, radical spell. How should the people find you and support you right now?
Why to support me? Well, they don't need to support, like, just support their own magic and their own
Support their own
practice.
magic.
Yes.
I mean,
and
the watch I Have Nothing on Crave.
well, yes. Okay. So in that way, yes.
So yeah. Find you and support you. Like, you can do some plugs now. Like, how did I know you're back on Instagram because I got to message you there. You hate it, but you're there.
Yes.
Which is fair. Me too.
So
yeah.
Don't spend too much time there, but go there and find all the cool things that people are doing, and then go away and close it. And then, So I'm at Carolyn Taylor Official on Instagram. The show is on Crave and Bell Crave. So it's called I Have Nothing, 6 parts. I think well worth it. And you can always ask a friend for a password or something, And Mae Martin has a fantastic podcast called Handsome.
So good.
With Tig Notaro and Fortune Feimster. So good. Like, I never tire of it. I'm excited when I think a new episode just dropped.
Yeah, I listened to it right before talking to you.
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah.
great.
Every episode, as soon as it comes out, it's so, from the first episode they did, it was just like listening to your favorite people get to know each other better.
Yes.
Which was
get
so
to know each
dear.
other.
Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's a great perception. It's true. And they have, as you go on, it's like, okay. So yeah, it's great. So, check that out. And Zach Russell has a documentary that's been touring the documentary film circuits around, and it's called Someone Lives Here. Somebody lives here. Someone lives here, about the homeless crisis in Toronto and, kind of everywhere, but specifically in Toronto during the pandemic. And it's a really powerful piece of film. So check that out. You can look it up, and I'm sure there are places to see it.
Yeah, awesome. We'll link to all that in the show notes. I'll go find it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really, really cool of
Thank
you to get
you.
back to me. I know you're doing so much to share this awesome special, so I really appreciated you taking the time.
Oh,
And
it
it
was
was
my
really
pleasure.
cool to meet you.
Really cool to meet you too. I look forward to hearing more of your podcasts
Yeah,
and,
thanks.
and an honor to virtually sort of meet your community, whoever's out there. Hello. Hello,
Hello.
witches.
We always say at the end,
Thank you.
blessed fucking be. So blessed
Ah,
fucking
thank
be.
you. Thank you. Okay, I'll see you down the road. Okay,
Bye.
bye.
You must be a witch.
The Missing Witches podcast is created by Risa Dickens and Amy Torak with insight and support from the Coven. Amy and Risa are the co-authors of Missing Witches, Reclaiming True Histories of Feminist Magic and of New Moon Magic, 13 anti-capitalist tools for resistance and re-enchantment. Available now wherever you get your books or audiobooks. Find out more at missingwitches.com.